Hello, Mike.
Hey, sure.
Good to see you. Been a long time.
How are you?
You see me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So I don't know if Maitreya is going to be joining us. We didn't have much of a Christmas, but we had our pre-Christmas party. I think you heard about that.
Yeah.
And one person showed up out of all the people that I invited. So at least I have one friend. I'm kind of like a hermit.
We canceled all our normal holiday
Yeah, I mean,
season.
I don't even think it's a good idea to go to the kirtans anymore. The coronavirus is spiking in this area, like through the roof, especially after Christmas and after New Year's. They're going to have to wait at least a couple of weeks for the numbers to go down, because, I'm not so worried about myself, because I'm double vaxxed and boosted. But if I give it to my wife and she goes and takes care of patients that are immunocompromised, then it's a problem. So we're on, let's see here.
It was either 21 or 22.
Yeah.
I don't remember which.
I think we're
I
actually on
think
23.
it's 20. Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's 23. I'm going to have to switch out. I'm going to have to refresh this browser because I've got the window open, but it doesn't remember it. Here's 23. Okay. Let me see if it remembers it now. Okay, here it is. You got to do it like recently, otherwise it won't remember. Do you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, I've been going over some things that I recorded a couple of years ago, and from the Origins magazine. Have you ever heard of the Origins magazine? It's an ISKCON publication, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
You have?
I have, yeah.
Excellent little magazine. And perhaps you heard the scientists launched this $10 billion space telescope. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but they spent $10 billion on it. And what is it going to do? It's going to look for signs of the afterglow of the Big Bang, which is total waste of time because they're looking in the wrong place. And the Big Bang didn't even happen, I mean, according to that magazine, I was just reading the first chapter or the first article called the Big Questions About the Big Bang. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because the second verse we're going to read has to do with science and its misconceptions. But they have this theory called the inflationary theory. They say that there was a small burst of gas and then it exploded right in the beginning of time, and it was like a super cooled version, and then it expanded and exploded. But all you get out of that equation is like a 4-inch square circle of gas that it's expanding, and ultimately it would just expand into a gas cloud with maybe 1 atom per square foot. So basically it's not a big bang, it's a little tiny fart. It's not even a big bang. And so that's all you get out of the calculations. And yet they're touting this as if it were the gospel truth, with all kinds of, slick magazines and television and computer animation and all this stuff. And now they're spending $10 billion of our taxpayers' money to put this debacle up into the space. It's going to look at something that doesn't even exist. It's like they said in the beginning of in the middle of the magazine, they're looking for material things like a man who lost his car keys in the driveway, but they're looking for them out in the street where the light is better, because they can look at calculations and mathematical formulas and things like that. But they're looking in the wrong place. They'll never find it. So it's a total waste of time. Prabhupada said all the space program is a childish waste of time and money. Anyway, why don't you read text 23?
Okay.
Uh,
This is what, chapter 3?
yeah, this is chapter 3, text 23. It's on the top of the screen there, if you can see it.
Well, that's different verse than what I see in my actual like book of it.
Oh, the book is different. 23. This is, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong.
You mean a
I
different
pulled up
chapter
the
here?
wrong thing. There, I got to go to chapter 3. I was looking at chapter 2. Hold on a second. Okay, that's the one that you see in your book too, right? Chapter 23.
So are we on 23 or are we on?
Yeah, I believe we're on 23. That's where I marked it at the end of the last broadcast.
Okay. Text 23. Yadi he aham na vartayam chatu karmani atandrita mama vartmanu vartante manusya partha sarvasha. Synonyms. Yadi, if, he, certainly, aham, I, na, do not, vartayam, thus engage, jatu, ever, karmani, in the performance of prescribed duties, atandrita, with great care, mama, my, vartma, path, manu vartante, would follow, manusya, all men, partha, O son of Partha, sarvashaha, in all respects. Translation. For if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path.
Why don't you go ahead and read the purport since it's very short?
Sure. Purport. In order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life, there are traditional family usages meant for every civilized man. Although such rules and regulations are for the conditioned souls and not Lord Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion, he followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps because he is the greatest authority. From the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is understood that Lord Krishna was performing all the religious duties at home and out of home as required of a householder.
Okay, we'll just take turns here. Isedyeyor ime loke na kuryam karma chedaham sankartasya chakartasyam upahanyam ima praja. Synonyms. Usedyeyu, would be put into ruin, ame, all these loka, worlds, na, not, kuryan, I perform karma, prescribed duties, chet, if, aham, I, sankarasya, of unwanted population, cha, and karta, creator, syam, would be upahanyam, would destroy, ima, all these praja, living entities. Translation. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put into ruination. Thus, I'd be the cause of creating unwanted population and would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. You can go ahead and read the first paragraph.
Varna Sankara is unwanted population which disturbs the peace of the general society. In order to check the social disturbance, there are prescribed rules and regulations by which the population can automatically become peaceful and organized for spiritual progress in life. When Lord Krishna descends, naturally he deals with such rules and regulations in order to maintain the prestige and necessity of such important performances. The Lord is the father of all living entities, and if the living entities are misguided, indirectly the responsibility goes to the Lord. Therefore, whenever there is general disregard of regulated principles, the Lord himself descends and corrects the society. We should, however, note carefully that although we have to follow in the footsteps of the Lord, we still have to remember that we cannot imitate him. Following and imitating are not on the same level. We cannot imitate the Lord by lifting Govardhan Hill as the Lord did in his childhood. It is impossible for any human being. We have to follow his instructions, but we may not imitate him at any time. The Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-30-31 affirms.
I'll just read the next one here.
Okay.
Naitad samacharej jatun manasyapi heyavan anivashvara Vinasyati acharan modyad yatarudro bidiham jam vidsam Ishwaranam vacha satyam tataiva charitam kvachit tesham yat vacho yuktam buddhimams tat samacharet. One should simply follow the instructions of the Lord and his empowered servants. Their instructions are all good for us, and any intelligent person will perform them as instructed. However, one should guard against trying to imitate their actions. One should not try to drink the ocean of poison in imitation of Lord Shiva. Go ahead.
We should always consider the position of Ishvaras, or those who can actually control the movements of the sun and moon, as superior. Without such power, one cannot imitate the Ishvaras, who are super powerful. Lord Shiva drank poison to the extent of swallowing an ocean. But if a common man tries to drink even a fragment of such poison, he will be killed. There are many pseudo-devotees of Lord Shiva who want to indulge in smoking ganja, marijuana, and similar intoxicating drugs, forgetting that by so imitating the acts of Lord Shiva, they are calling death very near. Similarly, there are some pseudo-devotees of Lord Krishna who prefer to imitate the Lord in his Rasa Leela, or dance of love, forgetting their inability to lift Govardhan Hill. It is best, therefore, that one not try to imitate the powerful, but simply follow their instructions. Nor should one try to occupy their posts without qualification. There are so many incarnations of God without the power of the Supreme Godhead.
Yeah, there's so many fake incarnations. Like in India, there'll be some Swami or saying, he's like sitting on a pillow and he's sitting there saying, I am the Supreme, I am moving the sun, I am moving the moon. And Prabhupada says, yeah, but in the next minute, he has a toothache and he has to go to the dentist. So here, text 25. Shakta karmani avidvamso yata kurvandi bharata kurvad vidvams tata shaktas chikirksu lokasangraham. Synonyms: Shakta, being attached, karmani, in prescribed duties, avidvamsa, the ignorant, yata, as much as kurvanti, they do, Bharat, O son of Bharat, kuryat, must do, vidvan, the learned, tata, thus, ashakta, without attachment, chikirsu, desiring to lead, loka sangraham, the people in general. Translation: as the ignorant perform their duties with the attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. Purport: the person in Krishna consciousness and the person not in Krishna consciousness are differentiated by different desires. A Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not conducive to the development of Krishna consciousness. He may even act exactly like the ignorant person who is too much attached to material activities. But one who is engaged in such activities for the satisfaction of his sense gratification, whereas the other is engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So it's all based on the desire. There's two different people. One desires his own purpose, and the other, and he becomes entangled in the fruitive activities, and the other person is sacrificing whatever he's doing without attachment for the sake of Krishna. Krishna nullifies all his karmic reactions, good or bad, and he's free to act with no reaction. That's akarma. That's without any kind of reaction, good or bad. So that's the difference. And it just has, like, I remember one time I don't know if I ever told you this, but I had that realization when I was walking around New Vrindavan and the farm, in the hills of West Virginia. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is amazing philosophy. Actually, all this time through, I was like 20 something years old at the time. And I was thinking, all this time that I've been thinking I'm the center of the universe, actually, I'm totally wrong. Krishna is the center of the universe. And I should be, centering my activities around him, because that's the actual fact. And it kind of blew my mind, it's kind of like an epiphany, But yeah, I'd never remembered that, for so many years, but it's a good thing to keep in mind if you're actually practicing that without, if you're constantly understanding that, then you'll it'll actually become a habit, practice makes perfect, so the way to create good habits is just keep on fixing your mind and engaging your senses in the service of the master of the senses, instead of, trying to satisfy our petty temporary material desires. Go ahead and read the 26th verse.
Sure. Na buddhi bedam janayad ajanam karma sanginam yoshayat sarva karmanim idvan yukta samacharan. Synonyms: na, not. Buddhi bedam, disruption of intelligence. Janayat, he should cause. Ajanam, of the foolish. Karma sanginam, who are attached to fruit of work. Joshayat, he should dovetail. Sarva, all. Karmani, work. Vidvan, a learned person. Yukta, engaged. Samacharan, practicing. Translation: so as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruit of results of prescribed duty, the learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness.
Go ahead and read the purport.
Vidaischa sarvair aham eva vedya. That is the end of all Vedic rituals. All rituals, all performances of sacrifices, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. The learned Krishna conscious person may act in such a way that the ignorant person working for sense gratification may learn how to act and how to behave. Although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties.
It's important that you can act in such a way that others will follow in your footsteps. That's another part of this whole line of thought, that, common men follow what great men do. So just like, for example, in New York, we have a bed and breakfast program run by Adi Purusha in Manhattan, and people can go there and get a room for pretty cheap compared to most places in New York. But everybody that stays there, he kind of like invites them to come and serve out food, prasadam, to the homeless. He does that 3 times a week. And so sometimes they do that, like all kinds of people. There was even one, who Warren Buffett is, the billionaire. He's like he owned Heinz, the Heinz company, until he sold it. But there was one guy who was actually working on acquisitions and stuff for Warren Buffett, and he got involved. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can be the poorest homeless person, or you can be like in charge of a multinational corporation. If you kind of like show these people, here's some service you can do. Anybody can do it. Just serve out and help prepare this food and serve it out to the people that need it. And he's been doing that for like, I don't know, 20 years or so. And they get real enlivened, and they actually come to class. He invites them to class, and they have a class in the kitchen, they 3 times a week. And then they also have a class at the Bhakti Center. And a lot of them are becoming devotees and getting initiated by spiritual masters. So it's a pretty amazing program. And they don't want to you don't want to hit people over the head with a philosophy, but if you just show them, here's something tangible. And he invites people, to come and see what he's doing. I've made a couple of videos of him doing that. It's got nothing but praise on the YouTube. It's a practical example of how to serve. It's all about service. And if you can, the work is dedicated to Krishna, though, and you might be doing the same thing for a philanthropic organization, but this is actually different because it's actually going to purify your soul, unlike any other kind of like giving charity to the, to the poor or whatever, this is actually transcendental activity. Well, I'll just read the next verse here. Prakriti Kramanani Gunakarmana Sarvasha Hankara Vimudatma Kartam Indimanite. This is a really important verse. Prakriti of material nature, Kriyamanani being done, Gunai by the modes, Karmani activities, Sarvasha, all kinds of Ahankara Vimuda, bewildered by false ego, Atma, the spirit soul, Karta, doer, Aham, I, Iti, thus, Manite, thinks. Translation, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Report, two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform. But, like, for example, a guy working, feeding out the poor at a charity, like a soup kitchen. Okay, he's doing good work. It's in the mode of goodness. But then there's another person, Adi Purusha. He's working for Krishna, serving prasadam to the homeless. There's two different people. They're working on the same platform. They're doing exactly the same thing. They appear to be working on the same platform, but there's a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. Just like a lot of people, when they give in charity, my wife's a big hockey fan. She watches the games, and every once in a while they'll show the hockey players giving out some award to the kids or giving some presents for Christmas or something like that. And then they pat themselves on the back, all it is a big advertisement to show how great they are, and it's just an ego thing. It's an ego trip. The person in false ego takes credit for doing everything independently. So they don't give credit where credit is due. All the things that we do should be understood that Krishna is the cause of all causes. If we do everything for him, then he's going to get the credit because everything's coming from him. Whatever good qualities we have are coming from him in the first place. So if you think that you're the doer, Prabhupada said you're fool number one. You're not doing anything. In fact, you don't know anything. It's just a complete illusion. I think even the politicians, they sometimes say, or like George Bush used to say, this is the ownership society. If you own a house, you did that, you own it. No, we don't own anything. It's a complete illusion to think that I'm doing anything. I built this. I own this. I'm the doer. It's complete ignorance. And, he does not know that this gross and subtle body is a creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Śikṣāṣtaka, the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he's factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. As long as you're thinking I'm the doer, or I'm the enjoyer, I'm the great mind, I'm thinking so many things that are so independent and I'm such a genius, you become further and further away from Krishna. You become deeper and deeper into illusion. As long as you think yourself separate from Krishna, if you realize Krishna at every moment, then all this ignorance and illusion, it's like a fog, it just dissipates when the dawn comes up, when the sun comes up in the morning, it burns off all the fog. So that is the difference. People are doing the same thing, but as long as it's not directed in the correct way, just a little bit of a tweak of the consciousness. Instead of working for my senses, I'm working for Krishna's senses. You're still working for senses, but not your own, for Krishna's senses. Go ahead and read 28.
Tatvavitu mahabaho guna karma vibhagyo gunaguneshu vartanta iti matva na sajate. Synonyms. Tattvavit, the knower of the absolute truth. 2. But Mahabaho, O mighty armed one, guna karma, of works under material influence. Vibhagyo, differences, guna, senses, guneshu, in sense gratification, vartante, are being engaged, et, thus, matava, thinking, na, never, sajate, becomes attached. Translation. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruitive results.
Go ahead and read the purport.
The knower of the absolute truth is convinced of his awkward position in material association. He knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and that his position should not be in the material creation. He knows his real identity as part and parcel of the Supreme, who is eternal bliss and knowledge, and he realizes that somehow or other he is entrapped in the material conception of life. In his pure state of existence, he is meant to dovetail his activities in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He therefore engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness and becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. He knows that his material condition of life is under the supreme control of the Lord. Consequently, he is not disturbed by all kinds of material reactions, which he considers to be the mercy of the Lord. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, one who knows the absolute truth in 3 different features, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Tattvavit, where he knows also his own factual position in relationship with the Supreme.
That's the first step. There's Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha means understanding our relationship with Krishna. Abhideya means the activities that are involved in that relationship, and Prayojana is love of God, which is the ultimate goal. Text 29. Prakriti guna samuda sajante guna karmashu tan akritsna svido mandan kritsna vinna vichalayat. Synonyms. Prakriti, of material nature, guna, by the modes, samuda, befooled by material identification, sajante, they become engaged, guna karmashu, in material activities. Tan, those, akritsna vida, persons with a poor fund of knowledge, mundan, lazy to understand self-realization, kritsna vit, one who is in factual knowledge, not, vichalayat, should try to agitate. Translation, bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, for these duties are, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Well, why don't you read the first paragraph and I'll read the second one.
Persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness and are full of material designations. This body is a gift of the material nature, and one who is too much attached to the bodily consciousness is called manda, or a lazy person without understanding of spirit soul. Ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship, the land in which the body is obtained as their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to be ends in themselves. Social work, nationalism, and altruism are some of the activities for such materially designated persons. Under the spell of such designations, they are always busy in the material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they are not interested. Those who are enlightened in spiritual life, however, should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. Such bewildered persons may be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as nonviolence and similar materially benevolent work.
Yeah, it's like it's compared to in the Bhagavatam. I think Prabhupada's alluding to that in this purport here, is saying that someone who considers their bodily connections with others as kinsmanship, the land in which the body is obtained as their object of worship, says, if you go to a place of pilgrimage and simply take a bath, instead of meeting the men of knowledge there, and you consider your material body, yourself, and you consider the land of your birth as worshipable, your mentality is no better than an ass or a cow. And so the reason you don't want to disturb the minds of these people is because they're attached. You can't say, don't do this. They're attached to it. So it's like, if you try to take away something from a child that the child is very attached to, they'll scream and yell and have a tantrum. So you can't do that. You have to give them something better. You have to engage them in something better, some other service in which they could actually, somewhat, they could do the same thing, except do it for Krishna. Everybody's working, but it's just a matter of the art of engaging people in Krishna's service somehow or other. Second paragraph is, men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Krishna advises not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are so more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risk, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. That just reminds me of a pastime in the Chaitanya Leela, where there were these two drunken guys. They were named Jagai and Madai. And they were like all the worst kind of debauchees. They were growing up as brahmanas, but they were engaging in, women hunting and drinking liquor and, assaulting people and stealing things. I mean, they were the worst. They always create a big disturbance in the marketplace. But Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda were out, going door to door and trying to convince people to chant the holy name, because Lord Chaitanya told them to do that. And so they came upon these two brothers, and Lord Nityananda, asked them to chant the holy name, and they got mad because they didn't want to be disturbed. They're attached to their activities. And so, they chased them away, and Haridas Thakur was like running away with Nityananda, and Haridas was complaining. He said, why are you doing that? You're crazy, and Nityananda reasoned with him. He said, the reason I'm doing this is because if we could deliver these two guys, then Lord Chaitanya's name and fame would be so much, more glorified. So he wasn't thinking of himself or thinking that this was just his duty. He wanted to glorify Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And so they came back, and Lord Chaitanya, gave him a report to Lord Chaitanya, and Chaitanya was very pleased that they tried to deliver these two stupid guys. But then they went out back the next day, and the next day they attacked him even worse. In fact, I think Jagai or Madai, I can't remember which one, threw a clay pot at him and hit Nityananda in the head, and he started bleeding. And when Lord Chaitanya found this out, he came there with a Sudarshan chakra in his hand, ready to kill them. But Lord Nityananda just begged Lord Chaitanya, please, don't kill these people. This is not this incarnation. You're not meant to kill the sinners, because if you kill this person, you'd have to kill everybody, because all the people are just as bad as these guys. So Lord Nityananda was more kind than the Lord, and so that's the position of the devotees. We have to take all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching these people that are attached, try to engage them somehow or other in Krishna consciousness, because without Krishna consciousness, they're doomed. They're not going to be happy. And Lord Chaitanya's mission is to make everyone happy. So we do take these risks on behalf of Lord Chaitanya just to glorify him. And if we try to do that, we can become empowered by him to actually do it, because the Lord Krishna wants to glorify his devotees more than even wants to glorify him. Even he doesn't want the credit. That's why he's telling Arjuna to fight, because he wants Arjuna to fight on his behalf, and Arjuna would get all the credit. So that's the attitude of preaching Krishna consciousness, because it's you have to have some kind of compassion, for the fallen souls. Otherwise, it's like a broken pot. They compare it, if you have all this knowledge and you don't give it to others, it's like a pot that's broken and all the liquid inside of it leaks out, and you won't be able to go back to Godhead because your pot is cracked and you're not utilizing the consciousness that you have given. To whom much is given, much is required. So it is a preaching mission, and so if we endeavor to do that on behalf of the Lord, Krishna will give us the intelligence to do it. And even though it seems impossible, that's what Prabhupada did when he came to the States. You know, he was completely overwhelmed. He didn't know how these young people, these Western countries who are so attached, that they would ever understand this message, but he did so on behalf of his spiritual master, and he was successful because he was preaching the pure thing, which is to, instead of pleasing, can you imagine like trying to preach to hippies in the 1960s, give up drugs, give up sex? I mean, who could actually even imagine that a 70-year-old man could do that with no backing, no help, no friends, no money, nothing, and then preach that in the West in the middle of these crazy hippies in Lower East Side and start a whole movement from there? It's absolutely incredible. So if you think of what he did, that requires some kind of compassion, and it requires some kind of conviction for your own spiritual master and to the importance of his mission, which he was convinced at as soon as he met his spiritual master in 1932. He said, you're too young, man. Why don't you preach this Lord Chaitanya's message all over the world? And so he was very much impressed by his spiritual master, because he impressed upon him that mission right from the get-go. He didn't waste any time. So go ahead and read text 30.
Sarvani karmani sanyasya yatma chetasam nirasya nirmamo bhutam Vidyasva vigatajvara. Synonyms: Mani, unto me; sarvani, all sorts of karmani, activities; sannyasa, giving up completely; adhyatma, with full knowledge of the self; chaitasa, by consciousness; nirasi, without desire for profit; nirmama, without ownership; bhutava, so being; yudhyasva, fight; vigatajvara, without being lethargic. Translation: Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, and with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight.
Purport. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad-gītā. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties, as if in a military discipline. Such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitution of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight, as if the Lord was his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Supreme Lord, and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. Nirashi means one has to act on the order of the master, but should not expect fruitive results. A cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he's not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in this world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real port of Mai, or quote, unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or quote, nothing is mine, end quote. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigata jvar, without a feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. I guess we'll stop here because our time is up, but do you have any thoughts, questions, comments, complaints?
No, I mean, I mean, especially in this last verse, I mean, once again, it just seems to be illuminating the idea that, you think that the rules and the regulations are in place, for people in general, but they're always superseded by like what Krishna is directly wishing of us. And that,
Yeah,
like, I mean,
that's what it's called, dovetailing. You know what dovetailing is, right?
Yeah.
Like, that Beatles song, you make a dovetail joint. That's not really the same thing. But dovetailing means like whatever you're doing, do it for Krishna, Yakroshya dasnasya jahosi dadasya. Whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever austerities you perform should be done as an offering unto me. So when it's sacrifice, that's called sacrifice, and it's called renunciation. When it's done for Krishna instead of for our own personal desires, then our desires become his desires. And then when his desires are realized, when we get a taste for reciprocating with satisfying his desires, that is so much greater of a happiness than our own personal happiness or fulfilling our own limited, sense gratification. One is eternal and one is temporary. And so when you actually get practice serving Krishna's senses like that, it becomes sweeter and sweeter to the point that where, even sex life doesn't even matter anymore. There's one famous, I think it's Yadunacharya or something like that. He said, he was a king, so he had lots and lots of sex, when he was a king. But then he became involved in Krishna consciousness. And he said, now, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, I turn my head, my lips curl in distaste, and I spit at the thought. So Krishna consciousness is so nice that it even, it supersedes any kind of a material, pleasure that could even be understood in this material world. The highest material pleasure is sex life. So if that is the highest, then if he spits at that thought, then Krishna consciousness must be so much better than that. So that is the idea of dovetailing. You have to act according to the rules and regulations of the varnashram system. At a certain point, then it just becomes a natural progress as we work for Krishna. We get a taste, and our renunciation and our service attitude becomes increases, and the more it increases, the less attached we are to our personal sense gratification. You can understand how advanced you are by how much you are not attached to any material things anymore. It's just like as one increases, the other decreases. And so that's the Vedic path. The Vedic path is act, as long as we have these material bodies, we have to act according to the rules and regulations. But once you get to a certain point, your consciousness is completely satisfied and you don't have any more to desire. You're, like the Bhagavad-gītā says later on, that, it's the highest position to be in, because you don't have any higher, you don't have any higher position to be performed, because you're already completely satisfied. Like Dhruva Maharaj, he wanted a throne that was greater than his father and even greater than his grandfather, who was actually Lord Brahma. And, when he actually met Krishna, he said, I was searching for a broken piece of glass and I found this invaluable transcendental jewel. And so, you're asking me to ask you for a benediction. I don't want anything. All I want, I'm completely satisfied. I don't want to, anything. So at that point, you can understand that your test is he's passed the test, because he wants Krishna and not his own desire. He was only 5 years old. He's performing severe austerities. And Krishna gave him the benediction that he would get his own planet, which wasn't even destroyed when the material universe was destroyed. So that was actually greater than his grandfather's kingdom, because even Lord Brahma dies and his planet is destroyed at the end of the Kalpa, so, if you give something to Krishna, then you're rewarded in ways that you can't even imagine. So it's always best to do that instead of our own petty desires, because living in selfishness, living in vain is not very rewarding, and it's only temporary because everything is destroyed at the end anyway. Anyway, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for participating again. Hopefully my tribe will join us on Wednesday. I don't know if it's still raining there or what. I heard there's like tons of snow and rain out still on the West Coast. Hopefully everything's okay. I'll talk to you later, Mike. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.